Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. I am your host, Marianela Medrano, founder of Palabra Training Center, where words are giving us medicine. And today I have the privilege and the happiness, the joy to have with me a guest who has actually influenced my work for many years now. And he's just here with me, John Evans, who is a writing clinician and integrative health coach who works with groups, individuals, and healthcare professionals, including physicians, nurses, therapists, counselors, psychologists, social workers, educators, personal coaches, and alternative healthcare practitioners, teaching them how to use writing for better physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Evans is a founder and executive director of Wellness and Writing Connections, LLC, and he provides individual, group, and institutional life course guidance programs. He is also co-author of Expressive Writing, Words That Heal with James Pennebaker, and his book, Wellness and Writing Connections, Writing for Better Physical, Mental, and Spiritual Health, is a collection of essays from the Wellness and Writing Connections Conference series. And he has, of course, developed all these themes that I just mentioned throughout the years. So welcome, John. Thank you so much. I am so grateful to have you here.
It's my privilege to speak with you. It's really my pleasure. I'm so glad that you reached out to me, and it thrills me to think that you have been implementing my work with your work, and that we are aligned as we are about the importance of words in how they shape our world. And that they can lead us to healing that's spiritual and mental and also physical.
Yes, exactly.
It's really my pleasure to be here
Yeah.
and answer whatever questions you may have.
Yeah. So tell us about how did you came to see language as a healing instrument?
Well, I could say it begins with my mother.
I like that.
She read to me when I was a child. I was her firstborn, and we spent, so many hours together. She was a very young mother, and she loved to read. And we had a great collection of children's books. That it would date how old I am if I told you the titles, but the whole Beatrix Potter collection of Peter the Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny and Jeremy Frog and those things from Beatrix Potter's time, and then the Pokey Little Puppy and nursery rhymes and Mother Goose stuff and things like that. She read to me constantly, and I just thought it was magic that she could see these little black marks on a page and make sense of them. And I used to watch her lips move as she read, and I would mimic what she did. And I grew to know the stories by heart. So when I was about 2.5 or 3 years old, I could pretend to read and do that magic that my mother did. And I know throughout her life, words and books were a tremendous resource for her. And so I it probably begins there, that I just grew to love what my mother loved, and I wanted to do what she was able to do. And so, skip ahead to, I decided to become an English teacher and study literature. And I I went into actually went into training to become an English teacher. I was an high school English teacher for 9 years. And then I wanted to dive more deeply, and I went to get a master's in teaching English, and then a master's in English itself. I went to Middlebury College for an MA in English, and I was privileged actually to study at Oxford University under some of the leaders in the field at that time. And although my emphasis then was not on health, it was how language could help students learn any subject, how essential language was to learning, and that writing especially was a means through which students could not just prove what they learned, but actually incorporate into who they were. So my research interest at Oxford was how to use computers to facilitate the learning process of learning about literature through writing about it. And so I developed an algorithm and some early programs for that. In 1983, I had one of the first computer labs in the country for high school students to write about the literature they were reading. And I developed processes where if they were reading a Shakespearean play, they could write a summary of the play using the characters' names, and then they could replace the characters' names with names of people they knew around school. And that was a great way of getting them to do a character analysis without actually calling it that.
That is so beautiful.
So, think about somebody around school who reminds you of this character in this Shakespearean play. So whether it was Much Ado About Nothing, or All's Well That Ends Well, or As You Like It, they would go through and they would do a search and replace, and in their summary, and they would just replace the names of the people in school with the names of the Shakespearean characters. And then they would read that summary back and they would say, whoa, they would have so many of these epiphanies about, wow, yeah, that's right. That's it. So it made the story really alive for them. And then I developed a number of other techniques to use the power of the computer to not just not do a textual analysis, but use it to facilitate the reading and writing process. And so it was not a big jump for me when I ran into James Pennebaker's research in 1986, where he was looking at how language could influence physical health. As I did research about how language improved learning, I kept running into expressive writing studies. And as it happened, my professor at Oxford, James Britton, was what they call the father of expressive writing in education. And what he was doing was using expressive writing to help students learn more about themselves. And then I would see expressive writing research from James Pennebaker about how writing and the word choice influenced your stress levels and your health. And so I would kind of put that aside, and say, one day I'm going to come back to this. So finish that master's degree, finish my doctorate, but always in the back of my mind, I thought, one day I'm going to spend time learning more about and doing research about how language influences our health and well-being. And so that's what I did. So, I became once I entered academia, I became an English department chair and an associate dean of general ed. And I had then the facilities and the necessary means that were needed for me to establish the Wellness and Writing Connections conferences in 2007. And so my university at the time sponsored our first conference in Atlanta. And then we had Wellness and Writing Connections conferences in 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010. And then I moved to North Carolina and I began working at Duke Integrative Medicine as a writing clinician. And I developed a course called Transform Your Health, Write to Heal. And then that was for the general population and the clinical population at Duke Integrative Medicine. And then I developed another course for professionals called Leading Others in Writing for Health. And that was for people like yourself, physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, nurses, nurse practitioners, to learn how they could integrate writing into the practice that they use with their patients. And that model then has been enlarged a bit from my training with Rick Hansen, who is a neuroplastician psychologist. I don't know if you know Rick Hansen's work, but I would highly recommend it, especially his work. One of his works called Buddha's Brain. And then
Yes.
another one of his books called Hardwired for Happiness. And then he has a book out with his son. I think it's just called Resilience.
Yeah.
But Rick and I actually taught at 1440 Multiversity. He was teaching on one side of the hall and I was teaching on the other side of the hall. So I got to meet him. We had dinner. And then he told me there was a training coming up. And so I joined his training and I trained with him to use what he has learned about neuroplasticity in my work too. And so language is so integral to changing the brain.
Absolutely. And you know, John, I'm gonna stop you here for a little bit to check in. What I hear is that you have been in this journey that seems like very circular in a way, as all good journeys are. They're not linear, they're circular. So it started with the heart, with listening to your mother's read to you and reading her lips and mimicking. And then you travel from that to science and technology, and then met Pennebaker and other people. And through being a teacher, it seems like you went back to the heart and that you are kind of circling in the, hard science, technology, hard again. Did I get it right?
It's been an amazing journey. I absolutely love what I do. I absolutely love working with people and helping them become aware of the role that language has in their life.
Yeah. So give us, let's say that someone is listening to us and is very skeptical, saying like, what is that? How can words be giving us medicine? Like what kind of nonsense is that? How can a word heal my back? What will you say to that person?
Well, it's very it's very easy to see the physical response that we have to words, because anytime that we hear something that makes us blush, that's a physical response to language, right?
Yeah.
Anytime we hear a word that makes our heart race or makes our stomach fall, those are physical responses to words. Somatic illness shows up as a physical response to our environment. And how we interact with our environment can end up in our body. So we know the work that many people have done about how the body
It's the score.
Body stores pain. The body stores emotional pain. And I like this this story that James Pennebaker tells about himself and how he got interested in this work. Is that growing up in East Texas, he had asthma. When he went to college in Florida, the asthma went away. he associated it with his environment. His, it was dusty in East Texas, and it was damp and humid in Florida. And then his mother came to visit him in Florida at the college where he was going. And while she was standing there in his room talking with him, he got a severe asthma attack. And he realized that it was not maybe the dust in East Texas that gave him asthma, but simply because of the stress and the words and the things, the language that was being used there. And and that triggered him to want to study somatic illness. And he began then, after he completed his doctorate and work like that, he became a social psychologist, because he thought that the language that is used in groups, whether there are our immediate family or other groups, really has an influence on our health and well-being, not just emotional health, but our physical health. And so I think, that's so true. It shows up in my life when I pay attention. I think this process is very mindful. And so when you pay attention to your interior monologue or your stream of consciousness, when you begin to pay attention to the language that you use in your head about what's going on outside you, then you begin to see where, if I change my words, I can change my world.
Yes, exactly. And it is, I think you're pointing to how this is linked. You mentioned mindfulness, right? And mindfulness inscribes itself in the indigenous wisdom of the world, the perennial wisdom, right? And yesterday I was talking to a very wise shaman from Ecuador, and he was saying, we were talking about language. This was in Spanish. But he was talking about language, and his mission in life has been to rescue the indigenous language, in his case, Quechua. And he was saying that when the colonizers came, they took away their language and presented it as the savage thing or the violent thing, and that they started then trying to navigate the natural world. Well, the natural world was so entwined with the language, the native language. And he says, when we wanted rain, we will go up to the mountain and talk to Mother Rain, and rain will come. But we were using our language. So when they tried, they were starving. And he was pointing to two things, the myth of extinction, right? Like nothing is extinct. And also this idea of the power of language, that if you change the code, you get different results. So your example of there with Pennebaker's experience and this the code switch that he did when he moved to Florida, and then mom coming and kind of bringing those other codes, then his body reacted to that.
Yeah.
So it's all these, this idea of interconnectedness that is in the perennial wisdom. And that if we know anything, I don't know if you agree with me, but if we know anything, it's because we have the what Thomas Merton used to call the anonymous voice of the collectivity speaking through us.
I agree with you. I think that's a very powerful concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You remind me of you remind me of a long essay called The Contact Zone. So the contact zone is the place where two cultures come together, and they don't know their language. They don't know each other's language. And so they have to navigate this space. And the essayist, and I'll remember her name eventually, but the essayist is talking about how the native
Mhm.
speakers tried to communicate with the King of Spain,
Mhm.
say what horrendous things were being
Mhm.
done in the
Mhm.
king's name.
Mhm.
And look what your people are doing to my people. And
Mhm.
so they drew pictures
Yes.
of decapitations,
Mhm. Mhm.
cutting off hands,
Yeah.
and just kind of the horrendous things that the
Mhm.
Spaniards did when they came
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
South America and Central America. Um, and so, it was his appealing out to her using symbols
Mhm.
to just try to communicate, look,
Right, because they were an oral tradition, so they
this is
will
not
use
who, yeah,
symbols. Yeah.
this is not who we
Mhm.
are, and
Mhm.
why are you doing this to us?
Mhm.
And so it was just a good example of how
Mhm.
important it is for peoples to understand each other. And
Yeah, yeah, and to respect. So one of the things that Don Oscar was saying is that also because they were an oral tradition, and this is going back to the neuro sense of, the work that you do, that he was saying because they were an oral tradition, they work a lot with cadence and sounds and the rituals, and it was a very embodied communication with the cosmos that the newcomers didn't have, right? So how much, I guess my question to you, in your work with people, and once you went into the embodiment of your work, what is your sense of how much, those memories that you mentioned that are registered in the body, how much an embodiment approach that includes the use of the senses and the use of movement can tap into the language that is repressed?
um,
What has been your experience?
well, I think one of the most important considerations that I've seen for that
Mhm.
came out of a workshop that I did at Earthrise in Petaluma,
Mhm.
California. I don't know if
Mhm.
you know that retreat
Mhm.
center, just outside of San Francisco,
Mhm.
outside of Berkeley. Um, but it was a retreat for Marin County um, family physicians and their spouses and partners. And I had a yogi that I worked with. And so we developed a workshop to do yoga and expressive writing.
Mhm.
And so she and I would collaborate on what would be good postures to
Mhm.
open up
Mhm.
the heart,
Mhm.
to be receptive to what needed to be said. And so as we made the implicit processes in our body explicit through our movements and language, there
Mhm.
was this release
Mhm.
of stress and tension. And then we worked through the whole Transforming Health Right to Heal model, which begins with expressive writing, and it goes through transactional writing, which is really the modes of compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. And then we work into poetic writing, which is really the metaphoric and story structure of we start with a connection with our body. So I use a poem like Otherwise, by Jane Kenyon, where she says, I got out of bed on two strong legs. It might have been otherwise. Um, and at the time, she had been diagnosed with lymphoma, and this became the title of her posthumous collection, that Donna Paul, her husband, put together after she died. But this poem, Otherwise, was a recognition that if the language that I use to describe my day becomes an extended metaphor for how I proceed through my life, knowing that one day it will be otherwise. So I use that poem to help people be mindful of their day.
Mm,
And this idea of being an extended metaphor for your
mhm.
day is what can open up sometimes. Oh, that's right. I'd never really considered it that way. So I have people write their own otherwise poems.
Mm, mhm.
And then we move into a poem that shows the relationship that you have with your body. And I use a poem like Lucille Clifton's poem, Homage to My Hips.
Mm, mhm.
These hips are mighty hips. These hips are
Yeah.
powerful hips. These hips have never been enslaved. Um, you know, these hips have been known to, um, yeah,
Yeah, it's a
spin a man with
very,
the top.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And so I have my students, when they write their own homage, I have them do a body scan. We do a body scan meditation from head
mhm,
to toe. And I have them stand imagining in front of a full length mirror and just imagining they're doing a body scan from their top of their head all the way down to their toes. And now, what is your relationship to each part of your body that we talk about, from your head, your forehead, your eyebrows, your ears, your nose, your chin, your mouth, your shoulders, your chest, your torso, your legs, your knees, and people will then write an homage to that part, because Lucille Clifton, when I met her in Chicago and I said, Lucille, I'd love to use your poem in my work. And she said, well, I'd love to have you do that. And she was a good sized lady who had
yeah, yeah.
always cursed her hips. And she said, I just got tired of cursing my hips. And so one day I just decided I'm going to praise my hips. I'm going to give homage to my hips. And so I said, that's what this opportunity is for. Let's get in touch with our bodies and those areas that have been a challenge to us. Let's flip that. Let's flip
Mhm,
that by flipping the language that we have used to describe that. So if you have had a challenge with your hair, or you've had a challenge with your nose or your ears or your mouth or whatever it is, let's praise that body part and flip the switch on that by using different language to appreciate what it is. So you're super conscious about having hair on your arms. Those are the arms that you've held your babies with. Those are the arms that you've held your lovers with. Those are the arms that keep you warm at night. And so just we also move into poetry to give ourselves permission to do what we've wanted to do, but we haven't had the courage to do. Um, and so that model is the model that we've used to encourage people to look at different ways that language can be used in our everyday lives. Um, so from there, we go into affirmative writing, which recognizes our strengths. Um, and then we project ourselves 6 months into the future using
mhm, mhm,
present tense, I am, instead of
mhm,
I want to
mhm,
be, or I wish, or I
mhm.
will. But we make I am statements as if what we intend for ourselves 6 months from today, we write about it as if it is at now. So
Wow, wow, John. I really, I'm listening to you, and again, I can't help it but to go back to the perennial wisdom, and even if we think about what mindfulness, the foundation of mindfulness is, like, it's so, I can't help it but hear it in what you're saying, like it's the awareness of the body. It begins there, with the opening the heart, of course, and from there flows, the heart is the center of the self. So from there flows everything. And then the awareness of feelings, which is not so much the feelings as emotions, but as pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, right? Identify, engaging into the body more further. And then the awareness of thinking, the contemplation of consciousness, and then the whole bringing all together through the awareness of understanding. I mean, in Buddhism is the understanding of the Dharma, but for the way I'm seeing what you're saying is that then in here is the understanding of the selfhood, and these inner and outer experiences that people are having. I get so excited and so affirmed to hear your processes. It reminds me of what I feel when I'm reading you or Pennebaker, and I'm always like, yes, this is what can help people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful model.
Part of the model involves legacy writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
There you
so
go. So that's it.
from affirmative writing, we go into
Mhm.
legacy writing, which is to say, one of the first exercises in legacy writing is to think of 6 words that you wish people would use when they describe you to someone who does not know you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then write about what is important to you about those words.
Mhm.
Not why do you want people to use those words, but what is important to
But
you
it's important.
about their using those words to describe you. And then we talk about, in legacy writing, we talk about, writing to encourage those people who are closest to us to know those things about us that they may not know. Because
Mhm.
people who are even the closest, nearest, and dearest family members may think they know us, but do they really know
Mhm.
what we have
Mhm.
thought of as our purpose?
Mhm.
Do they
Mhm.
really know how important it is that we speak all goodwill toward each other with compassion, loving kindness, and non-judgment? So that mindfulness is woven in and out of my model. And so
I
the
can see it.
final stage of my model, which actually is not in the book
Mhm.
because I developed it after the book was published, but I studied with John Kabat-Zinn.
Mhm.
And when I looked at his Full Catastrophic Living,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
talks about the 7 aspects of mindfulness.
Mhm.
And I took those 7 aspects and I changed them to A words
Mhm.
so that they could be easily remembered. And
Mhm.
so, mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment with,
Without judgment.
with
Mhm.
compassion, loving kindness,
Mhm.
and non-judgment.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it begins with awareness.
Mhm.
And so my process is, and this is an exercise that I can do with people to demonstrate this model, and it's very quick.
Mhm.
You can do it in 6 minutes where you say, okay, so considering the challenges that you face just now, I'd like you to finish this sentence stem. Considering the challenges I face with my health, I am aware that,
Mhm.
and you finish that sentence stem. And then you go to the next one. The A word was aware. Now the next word is attention. Considering the challenge I face, let's say with my present spine tumor, I find myself paying attention to. So it's awareness and then attention. And I write about that. And then the next word is acceptance.
Mhm.
So when I think about the challenge I have with my spinal surgery, I accept that. And we write about that. And then the next word is affection. So as I consider the challenges I have with my spinal surgery, I have affection for, and I would complete that sentence. And then the next word is appreciation. So when I consider the spinal surgery that I'm going to have, I have appreciation for. And then the final word is affirmation. When I consider the challenges that I have with the spinal surgery coming up, I affirm that. And so the words are, just simply awareness, attention,
Attention.
acceptance, affection,
Affection.
appreciation,
Yeah.
and then affirmation.
Affirmation. Yeah.
So just in
Yeah.
a very short term, I gave a talk about a month ago to a group of pharmacists.
Mhm.
And the people sponsoring it wanted to have something that was kind of off the chart, different for their pharmacists, because it's all about science and it's all about this. What could you do to quickly demonstrate to a pharmacist how they could relieve some stress in their lives? And I said, well, let's just do the mindful writing.
Yeah.
And so I did. So I led them through the 6 parts of mindful writing. And I had a pharmacist comment after that. He says, you know, I'm not one who gets in touch with his emotions very much, but this exercise opened up a whole world to me. And he was almost in tears as he described how powerful that experience was for him. So I would encourage you to, and your listeners to try that little exercise. When they think about a challenge they come up with, I think about the pain that's in their body. When I experience the pain in my body, I am aware that I am paying attention to, I accept that, I have affection for, I appreciate that, I affirm that.
Who I am in this experience. You know, yes, I mean, this brings me back again with the conversation I had with Don Oscar yesterday, where the way he was saying that in his tradition, illness, he was talking about COVID-19. He was saying that in his tradition, illness is treated as a person, right? So you have to get to know the person and you have to integrate the person into the community. And that's how you get to know what to do next. And he was saying that they had determined that COVID-19 is a woman and that they are treating it as a woman. I have to yet continue my conversation with him to see what to unpack that further. But you know what the steps, the 8 steps that you are mentioning, and specifically the affection step, really resonates with me, and also brought me back to that conversation. And again, it's just to say that this is the perennial wisdom that you are highlighting here, and that's why I'm imagining whenever you bring it to to places like that individual who is not easily moved and found himself moved by what you're saying, was because it makes sense. It's part of our, to use the word of Thich Nhat Hanh, our interbeing, how everything is so interrelated. And I think that's what you captured in the way that you designed this implementation of the A's. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that recognition. I really appreciate that. And aside from just our feeling good about what it does, one of the things that I wanted to do, we had so much anecdotal information being collected from our workshops and from the evaluations that participants would complete after the workshops. I went to the director of research at Duke Integrative Medicine, who was Ruth Woolover, who's now at Vanderbilt, but she was at Duke for many years, and she said, "Yeah, John, we should test your model." And so
it's been tested.
and so I really want to, I'm a big fan of what works. And so I thought, oh, this would be great. And so the director of Duke Integrative Medicine at the time, Adam Perlman, who's now with the Mayo Clinic, he said, yeah, let's take John's work to the next level and let's show that there is an evidence base for what he's doing. And so he opened the purse strings and was able to sponsor my first research on the model that I had developed there. So the model Transform Your Health Right to Heal is a 6-week model that includes those 6 types of writing: expressive writing, transactional writing, poetic writing, affirmative writing, legacy writing, and mindfulness, mindful writing. we wanted to test that. We have 4 assignments, 4 exercises in each type. And so we wanted to just test to see if we could measure what effects that had. So in 2016, we recruited people to take part in our study. Well, we had over 100 responses to our study. And so we went to the IRB and said, we need permission to do this study. And they granted us permission for 30 people. And we said, well, we've got this overwhelming response. We had over 100 people within 24 hours of our announcement. And so we went back to them and said, well, can we enlarge it to at least 40 people? And we settled on 40 because that was the largest room we could get that would allow us privacy for people to write and to do the study. So before the study began, we confirmed 40 participants, and they were to come to Duke Integrative Medicine on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock, and they would write in the workshop from 10 until 12. And we did 4 exercises each Saturday for 6 weeks. We did not provide them with any stipend. They were not provided with refreshments or transportations or anything. They just came, volunteered, they sat down, they took the assignments, and they wrote. And they did post-writing reflections between each piece of writing. Well, we before the study began, we measured their depression, we measured their perceived stress, we measured rumination, and we measured resilience. And at the end of the study, we measured those same things using the same instruments. And you know what? Not only did we have good results, we have a 97% compliance. Only one person did not complete the study. And that's because she had to have emergency surgery before we began. One other person did not fill out the final questionnaire. But otherwise, we had a 97% compliance. So, if you've ever done a research project, you know that in itself is pretty phenomenal. So it proves that it's feasible and acceptable. But then we also had this terrific response in lowering depression, almost 30 points. 30 points.
Yeah.
That's better than an antidepressant.
Yes, I will say so. And thank God that you have done this work and you continue. And I see the enthusiasm with which you talk about this beautiful journey you have taken, and it has changed, right? It has changed institutions from the inside out.
Yeah, I can speak about that from the perspective of Duke. I can't speak about it from other institutions, but in that study, we showed that we lowered perceived stress.
Yes.
We lowered rumination. We lowered depression, and we raised resilience.
Yes.
And then taking that study in 2016. When COVID came along, we decided, let's try to use this model for people who are experiencing the effects of the pandemic. And so in 2020, we devised 2 studies. One was for people who were experiencing challenges with the pandemic, just in a general way. And then we also devised a study for parents who had children at home under the age of 18, because we felt like that was a subset that was very specific and very vulnerable to the effects of a pandemic. We've got parents at home with children under 18. They're trying to do school at home. The parents are trying to work at home, and there's a lot of stress. So we recruited them and we conducted both of those studies in the summer of 2020. So the pandemic had just
Yeah.
blossomed, right? Um, and we developed this two of these programs. So they were both. What was fascinating about this, I think, is that these were not face-to-face meetings. Again, we had this terrific response. We had over 60 people who were part of this study. And it was called, I think, Expressive Writing for Resilience during COVID-19. And we used the same measures that as we used in 2016, reduced, perception, perceived stress, rumination, depression, resilience. And then we added one more, and that was post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
Could we measure post-traumatic growth? And so we use the same writing, pretty much the same writing prompts, the expressive writing, the transactional, poetic, affirmative, legacy, and mindful. They were 6 weeks. We met for an hour and a half each night for 6 weeks. And the results were almost exactly the same as the 2016 study. And then we had the same kind of results with parents. And so we published both of those studies. Those studies were published in Contemporary Therapies in Clinical Practice. The latest one was just published in November of 2021. And so
I think I saw that
I'm
one.
just
Yeah.
so happy to say that now we have a research base that supports the model.
Yes.
That includes, this is something that no one has done. It's a unique program because we've always kind of had a hunch that poetic writing is good for us. We've had a hunch that gratitude writing is good for us. We've had a hunch that we know that expressive writing is good, but we had not tested these other types of writing. And these studies have shown that we now have clinical evidence, empirical evidence that shows that yes, we can write, we can learn, and we can teach people to write things that will help lower depression, perceived stress, rumination, and increase resilience. We know that it can increase post-traumatic growth. And so these actions that we do with words are generative.
Yes.
They are life-giving. Change our words, change our world.
Yeah.
Which brings me
Beautiful.
now then back to the institutions that we're influencing, because using that model, we wanted to do another study that was sponsored by the Bass Connections at Duke. And we did a study on expressive writing for resilience among pediatric oncology patients and their caregivers. So people who had pediatric cancer and their parents, we got them together and they each wrote, and then we brought them together and they talked about what they wrote. That was our model. And then that developed into my teaching pre-med students for 2 semesters how to use this model with their future patients and with their future works. So it changed the way the institution would look at the tools they could give to pre-med students early on in their career, so that it would change their attitude toward taking care of themselves, but also then future taking care of their patient. All about the power of language to not only communicate, the essentials in terms of their care, but to communicate how important it is to choose words to describe our experience that support our experience and that benefit us. So, we've done that study, and that's an institutional change. But the most current one is one that I'm doing with the Duke Institute for Brain Sciences. And we're doing a collaborative work with a group in Durham called Together for Resilient Youth. And so I'm training 66 addiction counselors
Mhm.
and community leaders to use the model, use the Transforming Health Right to Heal model in their work in the community. And so that training is going on right now. Every Tuesday night for the last 5 weeks, I've been meeting with 66 people on a Zoom call to teach them the model. And then before I knew I was going to have surgery next Friday, we were going to have a 2.5 day workshop, which would help them become facilitators. So I'm going to certify them to become expressive writing facilitators, but that workshop will probably be in April. But that's how it has changed institutions, at least at Duke, and in the community of Durham, to say that, okay, now we're going out into the community and we're going to teach people in the community how changing their language can change their world. And so we've actually called this project Change Your Words, Change Your World.
That was what brought us together. So thank you so much, John, for this. There is so much I can say about it. I feel like I want you back here to continue another conversation to expand on this, particularly, how what's happening, the way I see you and others, other researchers, is that you are the keeper of the perennial wisdom. That's what research that's done with the heart really seals the wisdom of so many global traditions, seal and shows why it is so healing and so what you have done with your work is truly shift paradigms at all levels. And the beauty is that your work is generalizable. Like, people can take what you're doing. It's not just what you're doing at your university or in North Carolina, but how many people for how many corners of the world are benefiting from this. So I thank you for that. And in closing, I want to ask you, I also want to thank you for using yourself for using your personal experience to illustrate what you do, the work you do, and for sharing with us about your back issues and the upcoming surgery, sending lots of light and love in your direction as you go through the surgery, and asking you if your last words for today, but hoping that you will come back and we can continue the conversation.
Well, before we end, I would just like to say what I often say at the end of some of my workshops. And this is language that I use to support myself. And I hope that your listeners will use this kind of language to support themselves too. But it is a kind of a meditation. And it goes like this. So may you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease, and may you be loved.
Beautiful. I do live by those words. So thank you so much. And thank you for listening to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's interview at Anchor or YouTube. And if you are interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you find our program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion always.